yogis here. Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the live studios where we're going to hear Srimad-Bhagavatam. This is the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. If any of you want to go to the fan page, just go to Facebook fan page, daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books, and you can watch this. Maybe you can see yourself too. We'll turn around and let everybody get in the picture so you can see yourself on live camera. Yes, we're here at ISKCON of Houston's urban farm called Bhakti. It's Bhakti, and that's what we're looking for. Bhakti. Bhakti means pure devotion. It's the goal of yoga. It's the goal of meditation. It's the goal of life. And it can be had simply by hearing from the right source, with the right mind set, or the right heart. It's the means to achieve the goal of life, and at the same time it's the goal of life. It's the means to achieve the goal of life, and it's the goal of life at the same time. When you sit down to hear the Bhagavad Gita or the Srimad-Bhagavatam, then you have already reached the goal of life. It's just a matter of perceiving it. And we can perceive it to the degree that our hearts are pure. And our hearts become pure by hearing the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad-Bhagavatam, and the holy name of Krishna. This is called the Yuga Dharma. The Yuga means age. We're in this age of Kali. Kali means the age of quarrel, dissension. It's the Iron Age, when machines take over. And we're just in the beginning, and already we're seeing the machines starting to take over. They even make movies about it now, when the machines take over. I'm sure the local AI department is charting a course so that we can eventually let the machines do everything. Of course, I'm not sure if they figured out what we're going to do yet, but anyway, they'll figure it out someday. Hare Krishna. Okay. Very happy to be here, very happy to see all of you. This is the goal of life for me, is to share. Sharing means caring. Caring means sharing. So when you get something that's really good, you really like, the first thing you should do is share it with others. So I want to share with you a little portion of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. Haribo. But before we do, we're going to read a prayer, okay? This prayer is very special. It was composed by Srila Sanatana Goswami, who was one of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, who lived between about 500 years ago, 450 to 500 years ago. And he was the senior disciple of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was the most recent appearance of Krishna himself on the earth. He appeared in Bengal, India, and toured all over India, and more or less revived Krishna consciousness in the subcontinent of India. And Sanatana Goswami was very dear to him, and his brother Rupa Goswami was even dearer. They were brothers, and extremely elevated. One of them was the chief minister in the government of Hussein Shah in those days. It was a Muslim government. Did you know that in India? India was ruled by Muslims for about 900 years, by the British for 200 years. So they gave up their positions, and Rupa Goswami was the kind of like the Secretary of State in that government. We have the Chief Minister and the Secretary of State. And when they met Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they immediately fell in love. And wanted to join him. And they did join him after a little bit of a objection from Hussein Shah, who put Sanatana Goswami in jail because he was an autocrat. We're a democracy, or at least I hope we're not headed in another direction. For now, we still are, right? So, Sanatana Goswami and Rupa Goswami did join Chaitanya Mahaprabhu eventually, and they gave up all of their positions and their wealth and their social standing in the government, and they became mendicants. And they, under the order of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they went to Vrindavan, which is the area where Krishna appeared and had his pastimes 5,000 years ago. And in order to glorify the Srimad-Bhagavatam, he wrote these prayers, 5 verses only. It goes like this. Sarva Shastra Dipiyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva Lokaika Drik Prada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabho Kalidvandudita Ditya Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Padaya Prema Varsha Charayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguro Mad Mahadana Man Nistadaga Mad Bhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu sadhu tadayin adini chuchatakara hanamuncha gadachin mam premnavit kantayospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen. Hare Krishna. We'll say that one again. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, we've reached the 4th canto of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. There are 12 cantos altogether, and they describe the history of this universe in Sanskrit language. The Sanskrit language is eternal, and the sound vibration of the Srimad-Bhagavatam is also eternal. It existed before the beginning of the creation. The creation is created and dissolved and created and dissolved, just like our bodies. And the material creation is considered to be the external body of Krishna. But he has a spiritual body also, an eternal spiritual body. And he comes here every once in a while, like once in a day of Brahma, in order to reveal to us what the absolute truth is. There's a lot of persons in the history of the universe trying to figure out our origin. The latest group are the material scientists trying to figure out the origin of the universe, where we all came from. They've broken it down they're trying to break it down to a mathematical formula. But according to the Srimad-Bhagavatam, the source of existence is not dead matter, it's consciousness. Therefore the scientists are having a hard time integrating consciousness into their formula. They're trying now though, because nothing else has worked so far. So this history of the universe describes, because it's a long period of time it's describing, billions, trillions of years. And only the most important events in the history of the universe are described in the Srimad-Bhagavatam. Mainly the appearances and disappearances of Krishna's avatars. That's different than the movie.
Yes.
Yeah. They got the idea from the movie, but it's different. It's the original avatar. So in this chapter, there's a discussion going on between Shiva. Who's heard of Lord Shiva? Okay. Lord Shiva is a qualitative incarnation of Krishna, and he is in charge of the mode of ignorance. This material world is made of three modes of nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. You know, when you get your inkjet printer, if you get a color one, they give you 3 ink tanks. Somebody knows the colors? Red, yellow, and blue. He's an artist. Artists use these terms. Only artists use these terms. But yet, there's fancy names for red, blue, and yellow. These are the 3 basic colors. And if you mix those colors together, you get all the possible colors. Millions and millions of colors. 10 million. Who knows how many colors? Just from 3 basic colors, mixing them to in different proportions. So the 3 modes of nature are the first transformations of the material energy. And they're like 3-dimensional, touchy-feely colors. And they combine together and transform from subtle energy to gross energy to create the material world in all the forms and places and activities and different types of bodies, babies' bodies. And in each one of those bodies we have different activities, and we like to do different things, isn't it? When you're a baby body, you don't like to do certain things that adults do, or maybe we do, but anyway. So Shiva is the incarnation of Krishna, the qualitative incarnation of Krishna, and in charge of the mode of ignorance. And his wife, Sati, is the personified material energy. And the union of Lord Shiva and Parvati results in all of the different living beings being injected into the womb of material nature, all at the same time. And that's the beginning of the transformation of the material energy that results in where we are right now in this material world. So Lord Shiva is one of the most elevated personalities in the universe. And in the bygone days, in the beginning of the universe, there were great sacrificial performances made. Just like now we chant Hare Krishna, dance and chant. That's called the Yuga Dharma for this age of Kali Yuga. Yuga Dharma means the activity which is recommended for spiritual advancement and ultimately for spiritual perfection. Spiritual perfection in this case means to awaken our love for God, pure love for God. Sati is the daughter of Daksha, and Daksha is the chief Prajapati. Prajapati means progenitor. He's one of the personalities in the beginning of the universe who, created children. Daksha means expert. And Sati was his daughter. And Sati married Shiva. And Daksha used to conduct these huge sacrificial performances in which the greatest sages and kings and special personalities from all over the universe would come and to participate in spiritual activities. But Daksha had a problem because when his daughter married Shiva, he became his son-in-law. Now, according to social structure, the son-in-law is usually respectful to the father-in-law. And that's the natural order of things. But when Daksha came into the sacrificial arena and everybody stood up, it's kind of like when the judge comes into the courtroom and everybody has to stand up. It's like that. So everyone stood up except for two people, Brahma and Shiva, who were the two top personalities in the universe. Daksha took exception to that because he's the son-in-law. And also, Lord Shiva is not an easy person to understand. He doesn't care very much about material amenities. He doesn't have a house. He lives underneath the tree. And he gives shelter to anyone and everyone. He's described in the Vedas to be Vaishnavanam Yatak Shambhu. Means he's the topmost Vaishnava. Means he's the most merciful person. He gives shelter and spiritual advancement to anyone. No qualifications needed. And he's therefore worshipable by everyone in the universe. But Daksha was jealous because everyone was giving him praise and not Daksha, and he didn't stand up when Daksha came in the room. So therefore, there was kind of like a disagreement between them and the followers of Daksha and the followers of Shiva. They had this, cursing and counter-cursing kind of thing. You know how it goes on nowadays between the Democrats and the Republicans? Anyway, any groups, religious groups, spiritual groups, national groups. This is the way of the material world. Nobody can agree on anything about. So then Shiva, he being the most advanced spiritualist, did not participate in this whole discussion. He just calmly left and went back home to his tree. And Sati actually, she went with him, And they went back, and then later, Daksha decided to have another big sacrifice, and this time he didn't even invite Lord Shiva. And this is an insult, actually. And Sati, she wanted to go. Because, her sisters were there, her mother was there, they were all, getting dressed up and going to a social thing, which, that's what we do in this material world. We're social beings, And, but she knew that Shiva didn't want her to go. So now the name of this chapter is a discussion between Sati and Shiva. Well, actually, that was the last chapter. So then what happened was there was a discussion between Shiva and Sati, in which Sati expressed her desire to go and asked her husband to go with him, naturally. And Shiva said, it's better you don't go, because if you go, you're going to be disrespected, and then you're going to be upset, and this is not going to be good for you. It's not going to be for your happiness. So we're on chapter 17. Sati has now gone to the sacrifice without Shiva. Chapter 4, I'm sorry. It's Canto 4, chapter 4, text number 17. Sorry, thanks. We have a fact checker. Her name is Hannah. Hannah the fact checker. So sure enough, Sati got there, the sacrifice, and her father ignored her completely. Her mother and sisters, embraced her, but everyone else was under the influence of Daksha, so they didn't pay any attention to her at all, and neither did Daksha. And then she knew, they're disrespectful to my husband. So now she's speaking to her father. This is starting with text 17. Sati continued, if one hears an irresponsible person blaspheme the master and controller of religion, one should block his ears and go away if unable to punish him. But if one is able to kill, then one should by force cut out the blasphemer's tongue and kill the offender, and after that one should give up one's body. Little extreme reaction. She's really upset. Purport. The argument offered by Sati is that a person who vilifies a great personality is the lowest of all creatures. But by the same argument, Daksha could also defend himself by saying that since he was a Prajapati, the master of many living creatures, and one of the great officers of the great universal affairs, his position was so exalted that Sati should accept his good qualities instead of vilifying him. The answer to that argument is that Sati was not vilifying, but defending. If possible, she should have cut out Daksha's tongue because he blasphemed Lord Shiva. In other words, since Lord Shiva is the protector of religion, a person who vilifies him should be killed at once, and after killing such a person, one should give up one's own life. That is the process. But because Daksha happened to be the father of Sati, she decided not to kill him, but to give her own life in order to compensate for the great sin she had committed by hearing blasphemy of Lord Shiva. The instruction set forth here in Srimad-Bhagavatam is that one should not tolerate at any cost the activities of a person who vilifies or blasphemes an authority. If one is a Brahmana, he should not give up his body, because by doing so he would be responsible for killing a Brahmana. Therefore, a Brahmana should leave the place or block his ears so that he will not hear the blasphemy. If one happens to be a Kshatriya, he has the power to punish any man. Therefore, a Kshatriya should at once cut out the tongue of the vilifier and kill him. But as far as the Vaishyas and Shudras are concerned, they should immediately give up their bodies. Sati decided to give up her body because she thought herself to be among the Shudras, and Vaishyas. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 9:32, Striyo, Vaishyas, Tata Shudra, women laborers and the mercantile class are on the same level. Thus, since it is recommended that Vaishyas and Shudras should immediately give up their bodies upon hearing blasphemy of an exalted person like Lord Shiva, she decided to give up her life. Now we should understand this in a proper perspective. These are not ordinary persons. Sati is eternally the consort of Lord Shiva. And she's going to give up her body, but not in an ordinary way. She's going to sit down in the yogic pose, and she's going to start a fire from inside her body and consciously leave her body. And then she takes birth as Parvati, and then is reunited with Shiva very soon, within a few years. So this is not an ordinary affair. So when we hear about this kind of activity, we shouldn't think it's ordinary, like something we should do in nowadays. Text 18. There's lessons to be learned in this pastime. Sati is continuing to speak. Therefore I should no longer I should no longer bear this unworthy body which has been received from you who have blasphemed Lord Shiva. If someone has taken food which is poisonous, the best treatment is to vomit. Purport. Since Sati was the representation of the external potency of Lord, it was in her power to vanquish many universes, including many dakshas. But in order to save her husband from the charge that he employed his wife Sati to kill Daksha, because he could not do he should not so do his inferior position. I'll read that again. Since Sati was the representation of the external potency of the Lord, it was in her power to vanquish many universes, including many dakshas. But in order to save her husband from the charge that he employed his wife Sati to kill Daksha, because he could not do so due to his inferior position, she decided to give up her body. Text 19. It is better to execute one's occupational duty than to criticize others. Elevated transcendentalists may sometimes forego the rules and regulations of the Vedas, since they do not need to follow them, just as the demigods travel in space, whereas ordinary men travel on the surface of the earth. Purport. The behavior of the most elevated transcendentalist and that of the most fallen conditioned soul appears to be the same. The elevated transcendentalist can surpass all the regulations of the Vedas, just as the demigods traveling in space surpass all the jungles and rocks on the surface of the globe. Although a common man who has no such ability to travel in space has to face all those impediments. Although the most dear Lord Shiva appears not to observe all the rules and regulations of the Vedas, he is not affected by such disobedience. But a common man who wants to imitate Lord Shiva is mistaken. A common man must observe all the rules and regulations of the Vedas, which a person who is in the transcendental position does not need to observe. Daksha found fault with Lord Shiva for not observing all the strict rules and regulations of the Vedas. But Sati asserted that she had no need to observe such rules. It is said that for one who is powerful, like the sun or fire, there is no consideration of purity or impurity. The sunshine can sterilize an impure place, whereas if someone else were to pass such a place, he would be affected. One should not try to imitate Lord Shiva. Rather, one should strictly follow one's prescribed occupational duties. One should never vilify a great personality like Lord Shiva. Text 20. In the Vedas, there are directions for two kinds of activities. Activities for those who are attached to material enjoyment, and activities for those who are materially detached. In consideration of those two kinds of activities, there are two kinds of people who have different symptoms. If one wants to see two kinds of activities in one person, that is contradictory. But both kinds of activities may be neglected by a person who is transcendentally situated. Purport. The Vedic activities are so designed that the conditioned soul who has come to enjoy the material world may do so under direction, so that at the end he becomes detached from such material enjoyment and is eligible to enter into the transcendental position. The four different spiritual orders, brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas, gradually train a person to come to the platform of transcendental life. The activities and dress of a grihastha or householder are different from those of a sannyasi, one in the renounced order of life. It is impossible for one person to adopt both orders. A sannyasi cannot act like a householder, nor can a householder act like a sannyasi. But above these two kinds of persons, one who engages in material activities and one who has renounced material activities, there is the person who is transcendental to both. Lord Shiva is in the transcendental position because, as stated before, he is always absorbed in the thought of Lord Vasudeva within himself. Therefore, neither the activities of the grihastha nor that of the sannyasi in the renounced order can be applicable for him. He is in the Paramahamsa stage, the highest perfectional stage of life. The transcendental position of Lord Shiva is also explained in Bhagavad Gita. It is stated there that when one fully engages in the transcendental service of the Lord by performing activities without fruitive results, one is elevated to the transcendental position. At that time, one has no obligation to follow the Vedic injunctions or the different rules and regulations of the Vedas. When one is above the directions of the Vedic ritualistic injunctions for attaining different allurements and is fully absorbed in transcendental thought, which means thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in devotional service, one is in the position called Buddhi Yoga, or Samadhi, ecstasy. For a person who has attained this stage, neither the Vedic activities for realizing material enjoyment nor those for renunciation are applicable. Text 21. My dear Father, the opulence we possess is impossible for either you or your flatterers to imagine. For persons who engage in fruitive activities by performing great sacrifices are concerned with satisfying their bodily necessities by eating foodstuff offered as a sacrifice. We can exhibit our opulences simply by desiring to do so. This can be achieved only by great personalities who are renounced, self-realized souls. Purport. Sati's father was under the impression that he was exalted in both prestige and opulence, and that he had offered his daughter to a person who was not only poor, but devoid of culture. Her father might have been thinking that although she was a chaste woman, greatly adherent to her husband was in a deplorable condition. To counteract such thoughts, Sati said that the opulence possessed by her husband could not be understood by materialistic persons like Daksha and his followers, who were flatterers and were engaged in fruitive activities. Her husband's position was different He possessed all opulences, but he did not like to exhibit them. Therefore, such opulences are called avyakta, or unmanifested. But if required, simply by willing, Lord Shiva can show his wonderful opulences, and such an event is predicted here, for it would soon occur. The opulence Lord Shiva possesses is enjoyable in renunciation and love of God, not in material exhibition of sense gratificatory methods. Such opulences are possessed by personalities like the Kumaras, Narada, and Lord Shiva, not by others. In this verse, the performers of Vedic rituals are condemned. They have been described here as Duma Vartmavi, those who maintain themselves on the remnants of sacrificial food. There are two kinds of foodstuff offered in sacrifice. One kind of food offered in fruitive, ritualistic sacrifices, and the other, the best, is food offered to Vishnu. Although in all cases, Vishnu is the chief deity on the sacrificial altar, the performance of fruitive rituals aim to satisfy various demigods, to achieve in return some material prosperity. Real sacrifice, however, is to satisfy Lord Vishnu, and in the remnants of such sacrifices are beneficial for advancement in devotional service. The process of elevation by performing sacrifices other than those aimed at Vishnu is very slow, and therefore it has been condemned in this verse. Vishwanath Chakrabarti has described the ritualistic performers to be like crows, because crows delight in eating the remnants of food which has been thrown into the dustbin. All the brahmanas who were present for the sacrifice were also condemned by Sati. Whether or not King Daksha and his flatterers could understand the position of Lord Shiva, Sati wanted to impress upon her father that he should not think her husband to be without opulence. Sati, being devoted wife of Lord Shiva, offers all kinds of material opulences to the worshippers of Lord Shiva. This fact is explained in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, the 10th canto. Lord Shiva's worshippers sometimes appear more opulent than the worshippers of Lord Vishnu, because Durga, or Sati, being the superintendent in charge of material affairs, can offer all material opulences to the worshippers of Lord Shiva in order to glorify her husband, whereas the worshippers of Vishnu are meant for spiritual elevation, and therefore their material opulence is sometimes found to decrease. These points are very nicely discussed in the 10th canto. Text 22. We're going to have reflections and discussions on all these points pretty soon, so tune in. Translation. You are an offender at the lotus feet of Lord Shiva, and unfortunately I have a body produced from yours. I am very much ashamed of our bodily relationship, and I condemn myself because my body is contaminated by a relationship with a person who is an offender at the lotus feet of the greatest personality. Purport. Lord Shiva is the greatest of all devotees of Lord Vishnu. It is stated, Vaishnavanam Yatha Shambhu. Lord Shiva is the greatest of all devotees of Lord Vishnu. In the previous verses, Sati has described that Lord Shiva is always in a transcendental position because he is situated in pure Vasudeva. Vasudeva is that state from which Krishna, Vasudeva, is born. So Lord Shiva is the greatest devotee of Lord Krishna, and Sati's behavior is exemplary because no one should tolerate blasphemy against Lord Vishnu or his devotee. Sati is aggrieved, not for her personal association with Lord Shiva, but because her body is related with that of Daksha, who is an offender at Lord Shiva's lotus feet. She feels herself to be condemned because of the body given by her father, Daksha. So we'll stop the reading at this point and open up our gathering for discussions, questions, anything that came up during the reading that stuck in your mind, and I'm sure in this reading it was very intense. I didn't pick and choose something that I thought you'd like or didn't or not like. I'm just continuing to read the Bhagavatam every day and moving my marker. And this is what came up by the arrangement of the Lord. Hare Krishna. Okay, anybody have something to reflect upon or point you want to discuss?
Just to reflect or summarize, the point that the highest transcendentalist doesn't necessarily follow all the descriptions of the Vedic scriptures, whether they're not sacrificial, but just that the highest transcendentalist doesn't necessarily follow all the prescriptions, I thought was very profound.
We're hearing that he thought a profound point
Well,
was that, wait, I'm just repeating it because they may not be able to hear it.
Okay.
From there, they may not be able to hear it. So his point is, he was interesting to him that the performers of sacrifice are not necessarily the highest transcendentalists.
No, well, I can't remember exactly what it was that I'm trying to say, but I feel like the general message was something that was,
He feels that the general message was something that
in a lot of religions is hidden.
something that in a lot of religions is hidden.
Yes.
Very nice point. Very nice point.
Namely that kind of the secret is basically that
Namely that the secret is basic that
if your senses are, or if you're
If you're
not attached to anything,
if you're not attached to anything,
the
that
things that you thought you had to give up, you actually don't have to give
the
up.
things that you thought you had to give up, you don't actually have to give up. That's a very nice point.
Yeah, and
Very nice point. Thank you.
in a lot of religions that
In a lot of
doesn't
religions,
get said in such a direct way.
it doesn't get said in such a direct way. Well, us Hare Krishnas are pretty famous for being direct.
Right.
And the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad-Bhagavatam are very famous for being direct.
Right.
I think it's a great point. In order to understand the Vedic culture or spiritual life in general, one has to kind of digest this point. And that is that the goal of life is not material. I mean, it sounds flowery and far out, but it's really practical and down to earth. Because no matter what we get in this material world, whether we gain, whether it be a position, or it be opulence, or it be love, or it be family, or big family, or dynasty, or a huge, industrial enterprise, or, power over a lot of people in the country, whatever we get, we have to leave it. And even if you're a big renunciate and you don't have anything, you have to leave that also. I think that's your point.
It is.
And it's like if a person walks into the Chase Bank and makes an announcement, I renounce all the money in this bank. People will laugh him right into this funny farm because he doesn't own one penny of it and he's renouncing it. But actually, the real truth is that nobody can renounce anything. The concept of renunciation is it's actually false. Because nothing belongs to us in the first place. If something belongs to you, you can keep it, but you can't keep anything in this world, no matter how much you collect, no matter how elevated you become. At the end of this body, you have to give it all up. No matter who you are, no matter how powerful you are, no matter how advanced you are, spiritually even. So the goal of life is not material. The goal of life is to find out who we are, you know, and to regain our original spiritual consciousness. And unfortunately, nowadays, in this 21st century of the Kali Yuga, we are chasing after material advancement or technological advancement, put in modern terms, and we're thinking that we're advancing, you know, because we can walk down the street and take a selfie in front of some monument and our friend, push a button and send it halfway around the world to our loved one and keep walking down the street. And this gives us a sensation of being advanced. Who can do such a thing, you know? Previously, 100 years ago. I mean, I've been on the earth long enough that nobody could even conceive of doing that when I was alive earlier in this century. So you know, that material opulence, to be able to do things like that, gives one a sense of being powerful, of being free, you know, to be able to do whatever we want. But actually, it's not true, because every one of us has to answer the call of nature. No one can not. Therefore, the idea that we are free in this material world is just not true. We are all under the strict laws of material nature. And from time to time, you know, when we abuse nature enough, nature, you know, kicks back, pushes back, and a tsunami will come and just, you know. I mean, the town I was raised in California, or Northern California, I'm a village boy. And just up the road, about just 10, 15 miles up the road, in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains, is a town called Paradise. Yeah. I used to drive there almost, not every weekend, but I used to drive. A beautiful place. I mean, the Sierra Nevadas with the tall, you know, trees, and it's just a beautiful place. One of the most beautiful places on the earth. And the town just burned to the ground completely. Practically, there was not one structure left in the whole town. There were 30,000 people just. Not all the people were killed, but Paradise burned down. So, you know, utopia. We're looking for utopia. We're looking for, you know, a state in which everybody is going to think the same and feel the same, and there's no bad vibes, and we're going to, you know. And in the material world, it doesn't exist. And in the spiritual world, it does exist, but it's not the opposite completely of what we see here. It's the source, it's the prototype. There are spiritual people who don't agree with each other either. But their disagreements don't result in murder and this kind of thing that we're hearing, you know, in this pastime. This is in the material world. This is what goes on even in the higher planets, and that's the lesson that the Bhagavatam gives. You know, it explains to us what to do and what not to do, to make it very clear, you know, how to behave, you know, what to do, what not to do, how to behave in this world, that we can actually become detached from material energy and realize who we are. We all know when we have dream at night, who here dreams at night? Yeah. So when we dream at night, we see ourselves. Actually, it's possible to see yourself getting your head cut off in a dream. It's possible. But the subtle body that we dream in is material. It's not spiritual, it's material. But the person who's watching the dream or experiencing the emotions and the feelings and the exhilaration of flying or the terror of being, chased by a tiger or whatever that's happening to us in a dream, that person that feels those emotions and those sensations is the same person that feels those same emotions here in this plane. When we dream, our body, our gross body is in the bed. And when we wake up and we're in the bed, even if it was a beautiful dream, after a little time, short time, it goes away to memory. Or if it was a horrible thing, also the dream goes away and everything's okay. You have a bad dream and you wake up and you just go, oh, whew, boy, am I glad I didn't just lose all my things and miss my train and miss the plane and, ruin everything. And here in this world, if a person becomes very rich and then loses everything, they'll jump out of a building. They're thinking they're lost. They're not lost. And this is the problem. This is the problem. Because the soul, the spiritual person that we all are, is eternal. We don't change. We don't lose or gain anything. So to elevate our consciousness to the point where we can perceive that directly, to elevate our consciousness to the point where we can perceive that directly, then that's the goal. So when we leave the body, we won't be meditating on something material, and we can transfer ourselves to the spiritual world. It's simple as that. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam Tyajantanti kalevadam tam tam evaiti kaunteya sada tad bhava bhavita. Whatever we're thinking of, Krishna says in the Gita, at the time of death, that's where we go. So if you're thinking of something material, then you will come back to the material world and act it out. And you're in a dream also, but this dream in the gross material body just lasts a little longer, that's all. And the dream at night, sometimes it may seem to last a long time, but actually it's just a very short time.
Maybe that's how it is with life too.
Huh?
Maybe that's how it is with life too. We live for what seems like a very long amount of time, but then maybe we realize
Exactly,
it just doesn't
exactly. Yes, Camille is making the point that maybe that's the way it is in life too. Well, it is the way it is in life too, because both those situations are materialistic life. But life is eternal, the soul is eternal, we know it. But we're not taught, we're not educated spiritually to conceive of that the bodies, they're not the same. We're thinking the body is the same, it's just growing. That's the way we're taught in school by our parents, because we're attached. The material nature's purpose is to make us attached. So real spiritual life, yes. Yes.
Why is it material nature's purpose to make us attached?
Thank you very much. Why is it material nature's purpose to make us attached? Because we wanted to be attached. This is the verse. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajantanti. What we desire is basically what we do and what happens to us, even in this life. Since I was born a long time ago, raised in the 50s and 60s, and since then I've seen, the skirts go up and the skirts go down, the hair goes short, the hair go long, right? And it's why? Because people want those things. And the persons who become powerful materially, they become expert. They used to call it, when I was growing up, they used to call it engineering consent. Now they call it advertising. But they used to call it engineering consent. Means you engineer people's minds in such a way that they become convinced that they want something that they don't really want or need. And that's the purpose of the material energy. Because we came here with the desire, ichcha dvesha samutina, dvandva bharata. We come from this material world overcome by two things: desire, ichcha, and dvesha, or aversion. So the spiritual purpose, there's two purposes to the material. It's not all bad or all negative. There's two purposes of the material world. Krishna creates the material world to give us a place to play. It's like the children, they like to play. They don't know, they don't want to sit down and hear something spiritual and find out all these different philosophical concepts. They just want to play. So the parents give them playground, where they take them to the beach and they can make a sandcastle, very elaborate sandcastle, until the waves come and boom, then it's time to go home. They may cry, but they have to go home. Or they don't want to go to school, but you have to go to school, etc., etc., etc. That's material existence. But we came here because we wanted to enjoy separately from God. That's why we came here.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Eric.
So it seems as if we have these desires, we're born into this world, into this material world, and we have these desires. It seems that it's really desires for Krishna, but the material world tries to distract us and trade those desires for Krishna for material desires.
Oh, very brilliant. Eric is saying more or less what I've been trying to say all night, only very eloquently. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, actually, there isn't anything but Krishna. Because everything is an expansion. I mean, this is a deep concept. This gets right down to the nitty-gritty of the meaning of there being a source or an origin. I have my origin, my mother and father, they have their origin, mother and father, they have their origin, mother and father. And if you keep tracing it back, you won't come to an amoeba.
Yeah, it's just Krishna.
It's Brahma. The first created being in the universe is Brahma, and we all came from him. In the Bible, it's called Abraham, Abrahma. It's the same word, just as Krishna is Sanskrit for all attractive one, anointed one, and it goes to the Greek Christo, it goes to the Aramaic Christa, and it goes to English Christ. It's the same thing. It's the same word for the same person, for the supreme person, supreme being. But the supreme being means more than just the controller, the supreme controller, which God is. But I can be a controller, and I can be a bigger controller than you. And everybody has somebody they can control, or something they can control. Everything, everyone. Even a snail has something he can control. He can get inside or outside of his shell if he wants to, and disappear, So yes, but the fact is that the material energy itself emanates from the body of Krishna. And the spiritual world, which is eternally there, never changing, never dying, the forms are not changing, the forms are not getting old, there's no dust, there's no old age, there's no disease. This is the spiritual atmosphere, and this is why we all want to stay young.
The true nature.
Yeah, that's the true nature. And this may be a little esoteric, but in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, there's a description of the creation of the universe, and it's described how it's a reflective principle. Like if someone was to take a video of this little assembly and what's going on today, take a video, And then later on you're at your home and you got the digital whatever and you can project it onto the wall. And it looks just like we're doing this. But all it is light. You know? Light. You know, flashing on the wall. The persons aren't there. You know? I'm talking into this microphone, and into this, into something. Oh yeah, into there. Hare Krishna. Yeah, we're still here. I didn't forget. If we have some comments, please let me know, and then we can answer those comments also from out in cyberspace. Okay, so good. So far so good. So then, if I, you know, get up and go out of the room, and they play back the, you know, the thing. You know, if I'm outside, if somebody's outside, they may think I'm in the room. I'm not in the room. I'm somewhere else. But that sound couldn't have happened unless I was there and vibrated it. That's called separated energy.
So we fall in love with the separated energies instead of Krishna himself.
Brilliant.
Gotcha.
Brilliant. Eric has come to the conclusion. We fall in love with the separate energies instead of Krishna himself. But the amazing thing is that energy is also Krishna. So when he creates the material world, there's a reflective principle in all the codes that determine how things come together and look, like our DNA and those kinds of codes. They're all originally coming from the body of God. And therefore, it says in all the scriptures that man is created in the image of God. It's the image of God. It's a reflection. Image means reflection. Or mirage. You know, you look into the desert, and because of the heat and the sand and the situation, you see a vast body of water, and there's a little animal there at a little water hole, an oasis in the middle of the desert, and he looks out and he sees this vast body of water. He says, "What am I doing here? You know, I'll go out there." And then just runs out, and he keeps running, and as far as he runs, the mirage just gets a little bit further in front, and then he dies in the desert. And that's material existence in a nutshell. There's been not one living being in the history of the universe who has been able to stay in the material body forever. But we have a spiritual body. Material energy is inert. You know? It can't do any move, it can't function unless a living being manipulates it. This is inert. Last year, I broke my elbow, and I had to have an operation. So they put a block on the nerves of this arm. When it wore off, the block, my arm was just like, it was an appendage. It was like, it wasn't attached to my body. If I moved like this, it just went flop like this. I had no control over it whatsoever.
No electricity going through.
No, and you could put a pin in it, or you knock it, and you could damage it without knowing, without even feeling it. So the material body, the elements, the material elements that make up things are inert. They're not conscious. And this whole quest of the material scientist to put the chemicals together to make consciousness happen is just a myth. They're chasing a myth. But we can see, and we can taste, and we can feel, and we can touch, both in this body and in our subtle body. In every language of the world, there's a possessive pronoun, my. In every language of the world, we say the same thing. This is my body. This is my cup. The cup is now over there. It's mine. I'm over here. I'm different than the cup. That's easy to see. But when I talk about my mind, oh, that's not so easy to see, because you can't see the mind. But it's there, and everyone knows it. My body means I'm different from my body. I'm conscious. And it's I who can feel and touch and taste and smell and so on and so forth, not the body. And when a loved one leaves the body, what do we say? Oh, they've gone away, they've left, and they cry, and we cry, and cry, and cry. But if we tell the person that's lamenting, but why are you crying? He's right there, laying in the bed. Every single cell, every single atom is there. Every single chemical is there. No, he's gone. That means you never saw him, actually. So this is, spiritual training means to learn how to think spiritually, and through that knowledge to see spiritually ourselves. And I mean, some devotees, some people who study this science will learn a lot and then look out at the world and then, decide who's good, who's bad, who's ignorant, who's good, all these things. But they forget to look at themselves. This knowledge is meant to look at ourselves and to look through that knowledge and wake up. We're sleeping. We're in a dream. That's the point. And we go to sleep. We go into sleep. We go to a dream, and we have a whole other world, a whole other different activities. We can have a different identity. And we wake up. We're back here, and here we are, dreaming again. And then we go back and forth. Someone said, was it you that said? Yes. Same, the dream. They're both dreams. But we're there, observing and feeling and tasting and smelling and touching and experiencing all the things in the dream body and in this body. But we have a spiritual existence. We have an eternal spiritual existence. And there's an eternal spiritual world that's called Sanatan Dham. Sanatan Dharma, Sanatan Dharma. Sanatan Dharma means the activity of the soul, and Sanatan Dhamma means the abode of the soul. And the Vedas teach us where that place is and how to go there at the time of death. Because no one dies. I was in the hospital at my final post-op from my elbow thing, and there was this lady there, a very old lady, and she was terrified. Her daughter was somewhere else in the hospital and going to die. And she was she looked like she was going to die also. And she was just terrified. Her eyes were terrified. And I came by and she looked at me. And here's something different. And she said, please, don't let me die. Just like that. And I kneeled down. I took her hands, both her hands. I looked her right in the eye. And I said, you're not going to die. Nobody dies. That's freedom. When you actually realize that you're not going to die and that nobody dies, that's real freedom. But it doesn't mean that we just, turn tail and go to the forest and, kind of get away from everything and everyone until we leave our bodies. No. We still stay in the body, we take care of it, we clean it, we, have our relationships, we have our duties in those relationships, but we know that's the difference. That's what real knowledge means. And as soon as you know that you're not going to die, your fear goes away. We're afraid that the basic underlying experience of material life is fear. because we don't know what's going to happen. And we read in the papers, we have friends, that different things happen to us, horrible things in sometimes. Or wonderful things, And then 2 days later, down. They're up and then they're down. It's like simultaneously a roller coaster and a Ferris wheel and a merry-go-round. Material life. We're going round and round and up and down and round and round and we become confused. And that's the answer to your question. That's the reason. That's the reason. Because we wanted to enjoy without Krishna, or we wanted to enjoy in the same way that Radha and Krishna enjoy. And therefore Krishna very kindly gives us this material world and one body after another to try to do that. But at the same time, it's not that God is wants us to suffer,
It's just the nature of everything.
Yeah, we're in Houston. Okay, so somewhere in Houston there is a penitentiary. High-end, what do they call it?
High security.
High security, thank you. Who said that? Yes. High security prison. But they're in Houston. They're in Houston. It's just that they've got an extra set of laws on top of them. They give them a place to lay down and sleep. They give them something to eat. They give them a play yard to go out and play basketball for a couple of minutes a day, or whatever. They're in Houston, but they're not in Houston. That's the position.
It's like we're in the kingdom of God, but we're not in the kingdom of God.
Exactly. But if we wake up and we see, based on transcendental knowledge, then we can see that we're living in the kingdom of God, and then our fear will go away. And we'll no longer be attacked. That's what this pastime, the whole pastime was about. This is what not to do. The Bhagavatam describes everything. And therefore sometimes it's shocking, the things that happen in the Bhagavatam. Because it's trying to show us what not to do and what to do. So that we can know what to do and what not to do in order to become free. In order to be actually happy.
Is the Bhagavatam older than the Bhagavad Gita?
The Mahabharata was written by Vyasadeva before the Bhagavatam. But the Bhagavatam is eternal. The Bhagavatam is an eternal sound that sometimes comes into the material world and sometimes goes out of the material world. So yes, historically, the Bhagavad Gita came first, then the Bhagavatam. And at the end of the Bhagavatam, Krishna, who spoke the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna on the battle of Kurukshetra, which was, by the way, the beginning of the Kali Yuga. The end of the battle of Kurukshetra was the beginning of Kali Yuga that we're in now, 5,000 years, we're into it. And then Vyasadeva, who was the author of the Mahabharata, in which the Bhagavad Gita is one chapter of the Mahabharata, the history of Greater India. Vyasadeva had edited the Vedas, compiled 4 Vedas. It used to be just one sound, the Veda, but then he divided it into 4. Therefore he's called Veda Vyas, one who divides. He's an editor. He's the editor of the Vedas. Same sounds, but organized differently. Just like if you had a pile of jewels, all just mixed together, and we wanted to make them into piles of diamonds and rubies and emeralds and like that. So the Vedas used to be one just sound, but then it was organized differently to make it more accessible to us in Kali Yuga. So then after Vedavyas did that, then he added the Upanishads onto the Vedas. There's three divisions of the Vedas: Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda, and Upasana Kanda. The Karma Kanda are descriptions of ritualistic sacrifices, of which we heard about today in our reading. The Karma Kanda. 94 to 95% of the verses in the Vedas are about Karma Kanda. And karma means activity. The word karma, among different meanings, one of the meanings of karma is activity. So karma kanda means that activity that makes us become pious and makes us go up to a better life in this life and in next life to a higher position, planet. That's karma kanda. But the jnana kanda means when the body has become saturated by that activity, then the mind becomes activated spiritually or materially, subtly, and we want to know why. That's jnana kanda. So that's the Upanishads. The Upanishads are appendices to the Vedas, and they explain the difference between matter and spirit, and how to think spiritually and come to the point of understanding that there's an absolute truth. And the Upasana section is the worship, where a person worships the Supreme Absolute Truth. So Vedavyas, he had compiled or edited the Vedas and Upanishads, and then he wrote himself a summary of all of that called the Vedanta Sutra and Mahabharata, which puts all the principles that are given in the Vedas and the Upanishads into a historical context to make it easier to understand how to apply it. He still wasn't satisfied. So in the first canto of Bhagavatam it describes Narada Muni, his spiritual master, just happened to come by. That's the way Narada Muni is. He just happens to show up at the right moment, at the right time, in all kinds of historical events to precipitate things. He came by and he looked at Vyasa. He said, "You don't look too completely happy. Why is that? You've compiled the Vedas, Upanishads, Vedanta Sutra, Mahabharata, the Puranas. It's impossible for any human being to do that, because he is a literary incarnation of God, by the way." So then Vyasa said, "Yes, Gurudev, why am I feeling incomplete, even though I've done all this?" He said, "Because you've mixed different things together, and you need to glorify the absolute truth exclusively in one work." And then Vyasadeva said, "Yes, thank you." He went into meditation, and he pulled the Bhagavatam, which is an eternal sound, out of the ether. He pulled it by the strength of his own meditation, and it came out as the Srimad-Bhagavatam, which is the commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, and is the Nigama Kalpatador Kalitam Palam. It is the ripened fruit of all of the Vedic scriptures.
Okay. Interesting.
Yes, and therefore we really don't need to hear anything but the Bhagavatam. Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam. These two scriptures are so immense and so deep.
Fascinating.
And so fascinating, yes. And fun in different kinds of ways. Hare Krishna. It's been a real pleasure to be here with all of you. Something happening here, and I hope that it continues, and I hope to be part of it. Hare Krishna. So we'll stop now. Thank you, all of you out in cyberspace. By the way, we have 1,177 followers on this fan page. that are hearing the Bhagavatam every day. So it's a good thing. Spiritual education, to learn how to think for ourselves. Not that somebody can think for you, but we need to think for ourselves in Krishna consciousness, through knowledge, through real knowledge, so that we can become free from fear and we become happy. There's a very famous verse in the Gita. It goes, Vita, Raga, Bhaya, Krodha. Vita means to give up. Vita, Raga means attachment. Bhaya means fear. Krodha means anger. Vita, Raga, Bhaya, Krodha, Manmaya, Mam, Upashitaha. And in this way we can take shelter of Krishna. Bahavo, whatever, jnana, knowledge, tapasa, austerity. Whatever we do, in sacrifice, to get knowledge, to do austerity. For what reason? Puta, to purify. And for what purpose? Madbhava agata, to awaken our love for God. That's the goal of life. Just as Jesus told us. Same, it's the same exact verse. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy soul and all thy strength and all thy mind. That is Srimad-Bhagavatam. Krishna, Christo, Krista, Christ. Hare Krishna. Thank you everyone out there in cyberspace. I'll see you, let me see, tomorrow Saturday. We'll see you at 4:30 Central Time in America. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Samaveda Bhakta Binda ki jai. Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Bo. Hare Krishna. Thank you.